Good evening. And if you're just tuning in, you're listening live to 105.3 FM out of Mississippi and 107.7 of the beautiful city of New Orleans on UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio Network. And this is the Angel Rock, and I'm your host, Lorilei Potvin. If you've never been here before, welcome. We have lots of returning people that show up too, so thank you. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a Canadian, as I drop my coffee, Canadian psychic medium, crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner, spiritual teacher, and mentor. I am also a registered nurse, a budding animal communicator, well versed in the paranormal. We've shared our own personal experience on the travel channels, Paranormal Survivor, Season 4, Episode 9, called Demonic Hauntings. I'm also extremely well versed in near-death experiences, having had one as a toddler myself, and I've studied them professionally and personally for over 40 years. God, it makes me old. A few things. So we got a few people in the chat already. I always tell you guys both of my shows, because I also host on Thursday nights here on this network, The Thing at the Foot of the Bed, with my very good friend and very talented medium angel channel, David Hansel. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But both the Angel Rock and The Thing at the Foot of the Bed are both very audience participative. I always tell my guests, and I mean it, that my audience is very well versed, very intelligent. They ask great questions, and you guys are just a great bunch of people, and I'm so grateful that you're always here. Otherwise, Dr. Fred and I, my guest who I will introduce very shortly, would just be having an awesome conversation by ourselves. You guys add so much to it, so thank you. We already got Z-Sun Dragon, or Kevin. He says, hi, Lorilei, and hi, Dr. Frederick already. But if you want to join in the conversation, this network's been around for 25 plus years. We stream multiple shows daily, 7 days a week. I believe I heard from a little birdie that we're up to 40 hosts on this network. And when we're not streaming live, the archive server kicks in and picks randomly shows to stream, so we are always live. There's some great shows on the network from past hosts, and we're always getting new hosts. There really is something for everybody. So like, share, and subscribe, please. We'd love to have that. 80% of our listening audience is audio only, and this network does broadcast to every country in the world. Joe Montaldo, I'm going to give him a shout out. He owns this network and he knows what he's doing, and he provides this great space for us. So thank you, Joe. But a lot of people don't know how to join in the comments. If you're listening, you can't. So how you're going to join in the comments is head over to UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio on Facebook and normally on YouTube. I couldn't get it to stream there tonight. I'm not sure why. We have a second channel. It's called UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials. It's streaming there. Also, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is the Angel Rock with Lorilei Potvin. It is streaming on Canada's Most Haunted. I am streaming on Instagram to the Angel Rock. Just so you know, over there, I'm not ignoring you. StreamYard yet has not integrated comments into the main column here. So I do pop back and forth and try and see who's in there and try to address you. So if you think we're ignoring you, we're not. Let me make sure. I always forget something. One thing I did forget. If you want to watch us on TV, we do have our own TV channel. You have to go to Roku. You're going to go to the channel store, type in UFO space P as in paranormal. There's a drop down list. We're about the third or fourth one down, and you're looking for UFO space paranormal and United Public Radio. That's our channel. We'd love to have you join us over there and tell all your friends and family. Lastly, before poor Dr. Fred, he's being so patient. Thank you, Dr. Fred. Lastly, you guys know I'm going to promote it. So come hang out with us in Thunder Bay, Northwestern Ontario, Canada, where I live. This October 4th to 6th, 2024 for the Lake Superior Paranormal Convention. Tickets are available now. There's VIP Plus, there's a Supernatural and VIP passes, but they are limited, and the wife and wife team, Mel and Gal Willis, who were on the Angel Rock in April, excuse me, from Lucky Paranormal. When I talked to them, they're over in the UK right now sending some incredible paranormal pictures and videos and things like that. But I know half those passes were already sold out. So if you do come, and I would love to meet you, so I hope you do, there's going to be talks, there's going to be workshops, there's a paranormal investigation, and vendors. Some of the guest speakers are going to include Shane Pittman, Jeff Belanger, our own Carrie Lynn Shellhorn. She has Spirit Switchboard on Fridays here on this network, 6 to 8 p.m. She's one of my very good friends. I adore her. She's an incredible medium, paranormal investigator. she's just amazing, and I can't wait to meet her in person. October can't come quick enough. She's also going to be doing a special event on the Sunday, which is called Spirits and Sweets. She'll be giving messages from spirits. Well, the people that attend that will get to enjoy wonderful, amazing desserts. The Travel Channel's Beyond the Haunting will be here. Chris Rutkowski, he covers UFOs and Bigfoot. Dee Macaulay from Dark History, he is local to this area. He's been on the Angel Rock before. We also have the Winnipeg Paranormal Group and myself. I'm going to be giving a talk too, and I'm going to have a vendor table there. So I'm already working on all kinds of Halloweeny stuff. I still haven't been able to connect with Gail and Mel yet to find out. They were considering to be streaming this live, like if you could do it through the internet. So we'll see. Hopefully, because we've got people from all over the world here. So hopefully you guys may be able to join in. I'll keep you updated on that if they're able to set that up. So where you're going to head to is Lake Superior. LakeSuperiorParacon.com. Sorry, got that memorized. All right, finally to my wonderful guest. And I'm speaking of Carrie Lynn Shellhorn. She says, hi, Lorilei and Dr. Woodard. So she said, thanks for the shout out. Of course, we got to support one another, right?
Yes.
So Dr. Fredrick Woodard is a clinical psychologist and certified hypnotherapist who conducts original research on the supernatural, paranormal, hypnosis, and psychotherapy. I could not wait to have you on, by the way. His research stems from his dissatisfaction with general psychological explanations of hypnosis and altered states, which have not reflected his own personal and clinical experiences. His first book, Perceptual Hypnosis, A Spiritual Journey Toward Expanding Awareness, and that was through Schiffer Publishing in 2017, describes his theoretical approach to perceptual awareness, spirituality, and hypnosis. He presented his approach in his doctoral dissertation in 2001 and in a series of 11 peer-reviewed articles and psychological reports. Boy, this is a mouthful, but I don't want to miss it because it's a great bio. Between 2003 and 2014. His first journal article, Hypnosis and Phenomenological Perceptual Psychology, was published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology in March 1996. He's used his approach to developing enhanced awareness in his clinical practice with well-adjusted individuals seeking to explore and expand their human potential and achieve self-growth. He is also coming on to talk about his newest book, Developing Your Supernatural Awareness, Connecting with the Interactive Universe. Welcome, Dr. Fred. I didn't read it all, but you've got a pretty good bio. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
You got your camera working. I was so glad because it's so much more fun when we can see.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm going to start, as my voice gives out, I'm going to start at the beginning. How did you get involved in all this, especially the supernatural?
Well, the interesting thing is it's both little individual things and my profession, where I chose to get into the profession because I wanted to write the book that I wrote. You know, and so the little things would be one of the very first ones I had was an experience where I was in my front yard and I was realizing that everybody was very selfish, very self-centered, and I asked God, why aren't people more loving? And a white pigeon came and landed about 10 feet away from me, completely white. And I knew that meant something, but I didn't know what it meant because I was a little boy. And later on, I realized it was a spiritual Native American symbol, that the white animals mean spiritual, very spiritual event. And so I had little things like that. I also was at the Concord State Library trying to do genealogy with my family. And I had gotten all the way to a Revolutionary soldier captain and his father, but I couldn't connect the two of them. And I was at the Concord State Library, my last chance to put anything together. And there was three old men sitting over in the corner talking. And as I turned to go away, to walk away, one of their voices in my head said very clearly, check the land deeds. So I went to the Mormon church in Nashua and I ordered the land deeds for Pittsford, Vermont for my family. And one of the land deeds actually had, very unusual, but had the mother's relationship to her son in the document, in the land deed. It said Widow Mary Woodard selling to her son, Captain Amos Woodard, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another one where how did that voice come in my head?
Mm-hmm.
And, and when I did follow through with it, it checked out. So that was one of my, one of the goals was when you have something happen inside and then it happens in the outside world, that's one of the ways I know a supernatural experience. And the other is the transformation that takes place for the person.
I have to agree with you because I do teaching and mentoring. And when I'm working with people, that in my world, I call evidential proof that you heard this strong, clear voice. You were at an impasse, if you will, like, how do I connect these things? And you chose to trust that voice that you heard within. I always say within the mind's eye, doesn't mean we're hearing voices all over. And you
Right.
followed it and it worked out. Right. And the
Right.
more that happens, I don't believe there's any coincidences. What about you?
Well, I think there are sometimes. Like I remember once when I was at a friend's house, I was house sitting for them, and I was in college, an undergrad in college, and there was a Star Trek flick on, an old Star Trek flick, rewind,
Mhm.
a rerun, and Captain Kirk said to Scotty, "Shut the power down." Well, when they did that, the entire house went out, the neighborhood went out, and I
Mhm.
don't believe that was like that happening. I think it was just that was truly a coincidence. It just happened perfect timing.
I would call that a coincidence too. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't not use the word coincidence when I'm wearing my, as I call it, regular person hat. Not that I'm trying to be different people. I mean, we
But
all
but there but
carry out different roles. Mhm.
but like Carl Jung had a picture in his library in his office fall off the bookcase onto the ground and crack, and he wrote down the exact time. That was the time that that person died. That's not a
I
coincidence. That's a connection. That he called it an a synchronistic event.
I would agree because on my father's side, I always say, good French Canadian Roman Catholic family. My grandmother was a very miserable
My
woman.
grandmother was my
I can
grandmother was
understand
French
why now, though,
Canadian.
because apparently pregnant every year for 25 years and ended up with 17 children.
Oh
And my
gosh.
dad told me about this story. My dad was sort of in the middle towards the end of the children. So he says he would have been about 11 or 12, and this was in the 50s. And his third oldest brother wasn't home for dinner. All the children and obviously the family was gathered. And as my dad told me the story when I was growing up, his mother stood up and was screaming and crying. I think the time was like 6:13 p.m. or something. And she says, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh." And she said his name. He's dead. And my dad told the story that my grandfather said, just sit down. You're being ridiculous. He's probably just late for dinner, whatever it is. Now, what really happened, from what my father told me, was back in the day in the early 50s, the boys would work on cars and hot rod around. There was no seat belts. So apparently my uncle, who obviously I would never have met, my dad was he was a tween. He was driving very fast, hot rodding in one car, and his best friend was following extremely close behind. All of a sudden, the door flew open. He fell out, and his best friend ran him over. So the police showed up about an hour and a half, 2 hours later. And sure enough, that happened at 6:13 p.m. Right? You can't make that kind of stuff up.
No, you can't.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it is real.
Hmm. So you sound like you had some interesting scenarios. And I was thinking as you were sharing about as a child, noticing the state of the world and the way people treat each other. It made me think of even fast forward to today, like things just seem, well, I think it's about perspective, but a lot of people tend to be gravitating towards material things and, the latest this and the latest that. And I always say there's two kinds of ways, and I never say one is better than the other. We get the right to choose, but there's service to self or service to others, right? But having heavily worked in palliative care as a nurse, and I always say I've worked from people with people that were homeless right up to people that were billionaires, and not one of them has said, I wish I bought more things. I wish I did. It was all about, I wish I would have let the people that mean the most to me every day, how much I love them and things like that. Did you know, what's your perception on the world? Do you think like it's evolving more to service to self or?
It's evolving more.
Mhm,
It's evolving, and it's transforming for the better, but sometimes it's not. So it's doing a
mhm,
little of both, I think, because there's a lot of good that goes on. Like not now in the current times, you can't you won't have a police officer come up to the door and say, "Keep it down in there." They're
mhm,
going to come in and arrest somebody. There's no because somebody's not going to get to abuse a person these
mhm.
days, you know.
I think it depends where you live too, right? Like here in Canada, for a police officer to pull their gun, there's so much paperwork. You rarely hear about law enforcement being able to do that, but I know in the States it's a lot
Yeah, I
different.
know. I remember a story that I heard came from Connecticut, and it was a Canadian Mountie was driving, and he got pulled over and was given a speeding ticket by this idiot officer, and then the captain in the department tried to reach out to Canada and say this was a mistake, shouldn't have happened, and the Canadians responded, if he broke the law, it was supposed to happen. He's no longer a Mountie.
Oh, that happened. Wow. Really?
Yeah, it
That's
was sad. It
crazy.
was sad because the officer was overdoing it. He went too
Yeah.
far. He really did.
Also, wow, that's crazy. One of my guests that I had on a couple of weeks ago, she now works in the spiritual world, but she used to be a Mountie actually for about 30 years to switch from being a police officer into spirituality. Might seem like a big
Well,
difference.
they can work together.
They
Those things
can be
can,
working with people.
right.
So tell me a little bit about your work because I know people that work
Well,
with you in the hypnotherapy
so
world.
the second
Oh,
idea that
go
I
ahead.
had, which was the idea that that people make transformations. Um, there was a transformation made by an old woman that told me her story, and when she was in her 20s, she went into a laundromat, and she asked her husband to go with her, but he wouldn't. And so she went into the laundromat, and she had been suicidal and wanting to take her two children with her. But when she got into the laundromat, she said, "Oh, there's a guy in there, so I'll be safe." And the guy hurt her bad, knocked her out cold, and she had a near-death experience. And
Uh,
when she was going to go, he said, the person, she knew the person, but she couldn't remember who it
mhm.
was. But she said that the person said that she can go if she wants. She
Yep,
can't
I've heard
take
of
her
that.
kids. She can't take her kids because they have a life. But she can go if she wants. But she's going to have to redo her life again if
Mhm,
that's the case. And so what happened was she chose to stay because she loved her children and she didn't want to die anymore. And she lived
mhm.
the rest of her life in a real healthy way. And that transformation is the kind of thing I'm talking about.
So is this the kind of people that you're working with too as well? Like, are you working
No,
with
no,
people?
no. This was a research participant.
Okay.
So most of the people I don't work with them also. They're research participants. They were research participants in
Yeah.
those cases. One
In
time I had a guy tell me a story. I also had a guy at the gym tell me a story. It was really quick and they didn't get into it. But the guy said, I went to see my father. He was dying in the hospital. And he was talking to my sister who had passed.
Mhm.
And they were talking. And then he came out of it and he looked at me and he said, My God, they called me grandpa. And the son-in-law was sitting there, and he started crying, and he
Mm-hmm.
said, we had 2 miscarriages. We didn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like that was a real event.
I've seen that lots. Even myself as a little girl, I now know who I was speaking to as a little girl. He always told me I would have 3 little boys and told me the names. And I went through hell and back to get pregnant with my first son. He's going to be 29 in July. My second child, I believe it happened through acupuncture when I hurt my back. I don't think it happened. There's no other reason, but he was a wonderful surprise. Anyways, the names I was given were Jordan, Justin, and Jared. I don't even really like the name Jared, but anyways, there's a reason why I'm sharing this. When my first son, we found out it was a boy. I already knew it was a boy. I knew right away it was a boy. I knew within 12 hours I was pregnant. I felt so strange and unusual. The second one, no, but the first one, yes. My husband at the time would not hear of any other name than the name he has now, which is Logan. He was named after the X-Men because my ex-husband used to love the Wolverine from X-Men. My middle child, who has severe autism, his name is Justin. The current partner I'm with, I've been with him for over 15 years, and he never had any children. And when I was turning 50, I actually got pregnant and I had a miscarriage. But the interesting part, why I'm with big long preface to the story, when I started tapping into my mediumship abilities and working with mentors and what have you, how it would happen was one student through the teacher would call another student. You wouldn't see each other. You just get a chance to talk and you'd have to read each other. I can't tell you how many times they have picked up that little boy around me and described him and everything. So I truly believe he's on the other side. Maybe that was his role, to play guardian on the other side. I don't know. But that's my own personal story. And I've heard it many times with miscarriages. Many, many
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
Mhm. And children that come that will know about their siblings on the other side. From the research I've done, it usually looks like it's kids that have some language. So usually around the age of 3. But I can't tell you how many stories or video clips or people sharing this of their children asking about the sibling that they left back. I call it back home. And the mother and father or the parent is absolutely flabbergasted because there is no way this child would ever have known that there was a miscarriage before this child was born. Have you run into that too?
No. I
No?
haven't. I only have the cases I have are the only thing I can work with.
I would love to hear about that a bit and about this book that you've written, because I have to agree with you. Just reading your bio about people's perceptions of hypnotherapy and the supernatural, I would agree 100%. There's
Yes.
definitely been misconstrued.
One of the things that happens is I've had people tell me, you're the first person I told this experience to,
Mhm.
so many times. And they came in and they told me their story, and they'd never told anyone before.
Mhm. They have to feel safe, right? And a place that they feel like they're going to be supported.
Yep.
Because as I always say, especially when you're talking about anything within the paranormal, that it's not like you can stand in line or people across the pond, say on cue, in the grocery store and start talking about it. What I've found, anyways, is that one person maybe mentions something. If you're in a group of people, another person builds off that, and before you know it, the door gets opened. And a lot more people have had experiences, but nobody feels safe enough to share it. So I'm happy to hear that people have chosen to share their story with you for the first time.
Yes. Yes. And
Mhm.
that's how I got started. One of the ways I got started, I had so many people tell me their stories. And then I
Mhm.
decided I should probably write about this.
Mhm.
And the fact was, I had the training with phenomenology and
Okay.
humanistic interviewing, which was ways to ask questions without implying anything, without saying what it means.
Could you give an example of something like that for
Well,
people that
that
have
would
never
be,
heard them?
you said, tell Tell me more about that.
Hmm.
That's
Okay.
simple.
Okay. That makes sense, right? You're not
Because
telling them what to tell you.
because
You're just
no,
opening the
you're
door.
not. You're not. Or you said you were driving in the car. Could you tell me more about that? Well, I was alone in the car. That is different than being with someone else.
Right.
But getting to those questions sometimes implying things. I've heard people imply stuff in psychology sometimes, and it's not always a positive thing. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. And it can be supportive when it's done in the right way, but it can be
Hmm.
negative sometimes too.
I think we find that with a lot of different professions at times, not all the time. So
I
when you
remember when I was in a motorcycle accident and I was
Mhm.
finally released to go to a rehab center, and they put me on a stretcher, and then they put me in the back of an ambulance, and there was a guy and a girl in the back of the ambulance. Thank God that girl was aware, because if she hadn't been, I would have been back in the ER in a mess, because the guy started to strap me in, and I had all these pins in my leg that would have ripped
Oh my
when he
goodness.
strapped me. And she pushed him against the side of the van and said, "Get out, go in the front, get out."
Mhm.
And if she didn't do that, my leg would have been ripped wide open. I had 20 something pins in my leg.
Oh my goodness.
It drilled in like this way into the leg, and then they took them out later, but they would have all been ripped.
So by you sharing that, I don't want to misunderstand you. Are you saying by trying to allay some of these misconceptions because more harm can be done with some of these
Well, no, the idea
misconceptions?
was that woman protected me. She saved
Hmm.
me. And if she wasn't
Hmm.
there, it would have been a nightmare. So
Absolutely.
I focused on her. I focused on the positive, and I didn't really say anything to her. She didn't even really look at me after that. She just kept
He's
me
probably too
safe.
focused on
But
saving your life
yeah, but
and
the
your
point
leg.
was,
Mhm.
but the point was, I focused on the positive aspect of that, not the negative. The
Oh,
positive
I
was
like to
he
hear
was
that.
there to take care of me.
Hmm. So in your work then, and with the book, without giving it all away, because you want people to go out and buy it, tell us a little bit about it and some of the other books that you've written too, the other book.
Well, the another story that
Hi, Kathy.
was discussed was, there was a woman that was at a at an art show, and she was presenting some of her stuff, and then the art show was over and she went out to get in her car, and she heard her dead grandmother out of nowhere tell her in German to put her seatbelt on. And she got in her car and she put her seatbelt on, and 15 minutes down the road she got in a car accident where she nearly died. She would have
Wow.
died if she didn't have the seatbelt on. the,
Hmm.
the the windshield came within, like, very close to her, but didn't touch her.
Hmm.
And so that was an experience. And she had, before that, she didn't believe in anything, and after that she was a believer.
So these are the things that you were noticing then in your practice that people were sharing. It sounds like these incredible stories.
Yes,
And
yes, many. Some of them are simpler, some of them are more complicated. But
mhm.
I had one woman who was walking down the street, and some guy came along, standing next to her, and he was an older guy, and he said, "You're pregnant." And she said,
I have it.
"Excuse me?" She said,
Mhm.
"Excuse me?" She didn't know that, and
Mhm.
he said, "Yes, you're pregnant." And she went and found out. She went and got herself tested that day and found out she was,
Mhm.
but she hadn't. She didn't even show. At that point, she wasn't even showing.
So has it made you pause and have a little bit of thought about how would another person, or was it even a person? Because I've had people on the show talk to people off air, that, you've heard even at an accident, for example, somebody will show up with the right amount of skills to be able to help the person save them. And, maybe they're on the ride to the hospital and this person walks away and you never find out who this, basically people refer to it as an angel. You never find out who this person was. They were in the right place, right time. And I've even had people believe that it could have been an angel or something like that. Have people spoken with you about things like that too?
Well, I remember seeing a TV show where they had a woman that she thought she was going to die, and she was in the hospital, and this guy came in and he told her name. He even wrote it on the wall, on the chalkboard or something. And then he left, and he before he left he told her, "You're going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. You're healed. You're going to be fine." And she was. They checked her the
Mhm.
next day and she was completely healed. And there was no nurse with that name.
I believe it, because the other thing too, even though I always say I come from a medical background, and I'm not giving medical advice for anybody listening, but for myself and my family, I will look at alternative things, something more natural if I can. But I also believe that the mind, our thoughts, and our emotions are so powerful. For example, I have not felt my right leg in 30 years. I could step on a nail and I wouldn't feel it from my back injury. I had a healing session with somebody a couple weeks ago, and my back was flaring up like when it really hurt it, like I just could not get any peace. And she did some energy work with me, and it had to do with working with belief systems and things like that. It's called psyche. I swear to God to you, I can feel my foot today, and the back pain's gone.
That's
It
great.
wasn't that I It's not that I believe in her so strongly, because I know that I mean, I talk about these things that, yes, the human body can heal itself, but I think what we encounter, whether it's physically, emotionally, psychosocially, trauma, whatever it is, and we hang on to it, or we don't process it, it can really start to cause some of that disease process. Have you worked in that field at all yourself or seen anything like
Yes,
that?
yes, I work
Mhm,
with those things, but that's
mhm,
not what the book's about. The book's more
mhm.
about the spiritual stuff.
Okay. Well, feel free to share some more about it then.
Well, each chapter is I have a original idea for each chapter. Like one chapter is out of the blue, another chapter is feeling and thinking rather than seeing. Each chapter is a process of the most important idea of that chapter. For like the story I told you, where it comes out of the blue. When something comes out of the blue, it's not connected to that person, so you can't say they were thinking about that.
Okay.
You know,
So how did Okay.
like the artist that came out of the thing, she wasn't thinking about her grandmother
Mhm.
at all.
Did you
And
come to any conclusions with your research?
well, the themes are the conclusions,
Okay.
the ideas of each chapter, plus about 12 in the back. One of the last chapters, I have 12 ideas that are pretty common without throughout the other stories. But of course, it's limited to what I've been exposed to, what stories have been told to me. I can't just make stuff up and add it, at least
Mhm.
not in that work, you know. And so that at the end of each chapter, I have um, exercises to help people wake up so that they can either have the experience, have another experience, or have their first experience if they haven't had any.
I really like that, because there's a lot of people that I know that I've run into that have been they know they're here for a reason. They don't know what it is. They don't know what their life purpose is, or even how to connect, if you will, with the supernatural. So I love a book like that.
Yeah,
So how did you find it? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say,
No,
so
no.
how did you find your research subjects?
Oh, I put ads in the paper and I had an open mind toward it to begin with. So some people realize that. But when I put the ads in the paper, in the local papers, then I started to get people that came.
Okay. So what helped you with the research for your book? Like in the way of like connecting with the interactive universe, in the way of like a methodology, techniques, things like that?
Well, the methodology was phenomenological. I just used the humanistic interviewing techniques with the phenomenology, the aspect the of how letting the person tell their story until there's nothing left they can say, and I don't intervene. I don't like interfere. I just listen to what they're saying and ask questions later to things that they could expand on. And it's always an open-ended question. You said, can you say more about that? Kind of a
Hmm.
question, you know.
And it sounds like the method that you use made people feel safe, but the fact that you had shared a little bit earlier that people said, I've never told anybody about this story before you.
Right. Yeah, and
Hmm.
some of those were really serious ones. I remember one woman that wasn't in the book. Her story's not in the book except for mentioned, but it was in one of my journal articles. It was she had seen a friend of hers. She'd never met her husband, the woman's husband. She had but she was kind of like more than just an acquaintance, but not a real friend.
Okay.
But so she saw the person, she gave her a hug and said, "Oh my God, he's going to kill her." But she
Oh
had
my,
no way of being able to prove that. Nothing she could say or do to get that to do anything about that. She didn't even know the guy. She'd never met him. And
did it,
so
go ahead.
and so 2 weeks later he did.
Oh my goodness. What a weight to bear too, right? And actually, I had this conversation with somebody last night and the night before, especially. I had a strange weekend this weekend full with serendipitous things that happened, and it was a really interesting weekend. And I don't usually have weekends like that. But one person in particular was sharing with me that they get dreams, and they know that if they dream the same dream 3 times, that it gives them a vision of what's going to come in the future. And they said it's been things like natural disasters and sort of like what you shared, this poor woman picked this up right away. Like, what do you do with it? Like, it's not like you could call the
Well,
police or
there was a case that I read out of a a journal of psychic research, and from early from like this was the time of gold in my ear. It was before my time,
Mhm,
and it was her time, and this woman was an English housewife who was meditating, and she witnessed like an invasion on the Olympics in
mhm.
Israel. Like she witnessed this. And so she called up Gold in My Ear to tell her. And Gold in My Ear called the United States together. The United States and Israel were figured out where it was, and they stayed nearby, and they ended up stopping them.
Wow. Now that
But
is unusual.
that's very unusual. And at first they
Mhm.
were like trying to figure out if she was involved in some way, but she wasn't. She was truly just a housewife meditating.
I've had somebody share with me a few years back because it's a really heavy weight to carry something like that and know it's going to happen. And who do you tell? Because that's the first thing when I've had conversations with certain people that have shared this is, well, you can't just call up law enforcement, especially after the fact if it's happened, right? Like, because first person they look at is, why do you know these details and what's going on and how involved are you? But I had one person share with me that they are seeing through the eyes of a serial killer. They can see with
Oh
how they
God.
hunt. This individual hunts their victims, and oh, I'm getting
Oh
goosebumps as I'm
God.
telling you. And we've had many a conversation. Like, what do you do with that? Right? Like, first question is, why am I being shown this? And second of all, what do I do with it? Right?
Right.
It's pretty heavy. Now,
Yeah, that is.
yeah, like I say, you know what? You have the most interesting conversations with people once you open the door to this world, I always find. And yeah, I had no answers for them either, because what do you say? What do you do with something like that?
Yeah, if the person tells somebody, they could risk the chance that they're going to be accused of being
Absolutely.
involved, and that would be awful.
And they had nothing to do with it. For example, he may pop in here. His name's Jonathan. He's got JK47 Paranormal Investigations. And back in Pennsylvania, was it maybe 6 months ago, there was somebody by the name of Danilo Cavalcante who had escaped from the jail, and they had the biggest manhunt they'd ever had. And Jonathan, who I would consider to be like a light worker, he works with technology, with ghost boxes and stuff, and Spirit came through to tell him where this guy was hiding. And we were talking about this. I said, well, what are you going to do? You can't just call him up and say, hey, I know where he's hiding. But he was all the way over on the West Coast. But the thing is, like, what do you do with that, right? And it ended up, the guy afterwards, when he was caught through a Spanish interpreter, he was exactly where Spirit had told him. He was moving, but he had stayed in this little hut beside the river over where he was. So what do you do with all this, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff.
So in your book, you say the universe is alive with invisible beings. Who or what are they, from your research or even your own thoughts? What do you think of that? What do you think they
Um,
are?
a lot of times they're relatives, but they're people. A lot of the times they're former people.
Mm-hmm.
There's also can be demonic stuff that is there too. There
Mm-hmm.
can be. I don't have proof of that completely, but the description that a couple people gave implied those kind of things, that they were being harmed or messed with. But when they asked the thing to stop, it did stop. When they
It
told
didn't
it
for
to
me.
stop,
It
it
didn't
did.
for me. Mm-mm. The only thing, mine started with a dream like it happened 5 minutes ago. And it was about 16, 17 years ago. And there was a man in my old house in the tree of my front yard. Now we say I'm not a high maintenance girl, but I can describe exactly what he was wearing. Very expensive, dark charcoal gray pinstriped suit, white silk shirt, black expensive silk tie. You could tell he had short, slick back black hair to here. He had a very neatly trimmed, all in one piece beard, mustache, and goatee. But as I kept looking up, his skin was like this sickly kind of whitish green. Eyes were black, and then they would switch to flame. And I remember saying to him, who are you? And at that time, I had hurt my back, but I was making jewelry and little pet accessories. And I'd just gone around the day before. I'd gone out shopping and talking to local businesses, and they all wanted to carry my merchandise, but nobody wanted, like, you know how people usually take a fee for selling your stuff? Nobody wanted to. And what he said to me is, hello, Lorilei, you see that little business of yours? That's nothing. I can give you everything beyond your wildest dreams, fame, money, you name it. And it's not radio friendly what I told him to do in the dream. And they kept saying, who are you? And in the dream, he identified himself as a demon, told me the name and spelt it. And again, I told him even more emphatically where to go. And I had just taken my angel card, certified angel card reading course, and I had called on Archangel Michael in the dream. I can't even describe the vibrancy of the colors. It was like a royal blue, silver, and white. I woke up, it was the middle of the night, shaking, crying, and in a complete sweat, which is nothing of me. I don't even usually remember most of my dreams. And all heck, just before, after he told me he was a demon, and I told him where to go, and I called on Archangel Michael and told him to leave, he went, oh, no, 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 no. Every time you see a crow or a raven, you're going to know who it is. And I swear to you, after that, all heck did break loose in my house. My partner's been thrown 15 feet across the kitchen, burns, scratches, bites, you name it. Is one of the most craziest stories. We left the house because we couldn't get help. And I'm not making it up. I got the pictures to prove it, other people that have, it was crazy. And we had lots of people try to help. We eventually just left. That's how I got into what I'm doing now because I
Uh,
never planned on this. Oh, yeah. So
yeah, there's
Kevin's,
always a reason.
there's always a reason. Yes. Like I always say, I wouldn't, I wouldn't wish this on a blade of grass. Not that I'm any better than a blade of grass. I really do believe we all come from the same place and we're all truly part of each other. But I don't look back in anger. I wouldn't want somebody else to go through it. But maybe that's what it took for me to be doing what I'm doing now because I had no plans to be doing what I'm doing. None. So, and that's not
And
common,
that
that kind
that
of
that's that. Well, I think it's the way it naturally happens. I remember
thing.
being 18, and I was in college, and I was living in an apartment, and I
Hmm.
got this flyer from a local place that was doing UFO stuff and paranormal stuff, and I said, "What kind of crap is this?"
Hmm.
And then slowly but surely, I started opening up.
Well, plus even the type of research that you've done, like you're a pretty special person to take on this kind of research. And I'd love to ask you, since this is your field of expertise, it doesn't seem like enough people in your profession do this kind of work. Would I be wrong in saying that? Or are you seeing
Oh,
more of it? Or,
there's a handful of people
that's
that
what I
do it, but
thought.
there's just a handful of
Hmm.
people that I'm aware of. There was somebody down, there was Ian Stevenson, and there's actually a couple of other people down that way that are doing stuff like that. And then there was somebody out in California that was doing that work too, but not a whole lot of people.
I agree. No, I was just thinking of something because where
You know,
I
an
live,
interesting thing is I remember a story that there was a doctor, I don't even remember his name, from the 1800s who who actually took this woman and hypnotized her and helped her, and she became the like founder of the Shakers or somebody, like
mhm,
somebody really important after that.
right.
And and his article or his book mentioned that stuff, but it wasn't very popular and it wasn't very well known.
Yeah, I often say that it's a good thing, but it's also a curse with the advent of all this stuff on TV, opening the door to the paranormal. I think it's helped a lot more people look at it, question it, and try to see, is it real, what's going on, and so forth. But I was just thinking of this as we were talking. With the subjects for your research, were they from a particular geographical area or all over? And the reason why I ask this, where I live is right on the shores of Lake Superior, one of the biggest Great Lakes that we share with the US. And I'm about 35 minutes north of the Minnesota border and about 6.5 hours north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, we have a very strong First Nations history where I live, but I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm not the only one that has had experiences. And I have heard of every type of paranormal activity you could think of. There have been people that have shared stories or pictures. We're talking Bigfoot, we're talking dogmen, we're talking hauntings, we're talking ufology, you name it. So, what I was thinking is, did you find, depending on where your subjects came from, if there were more or more intense experiences, depending on where they lived as well?
It seems to be. I had just the research. I put 51 stories in my book, and
Hmm.
that's it. So that's the number of stories that are actually in the book. But I would say that it's not contingent on an area. I
Okay.
have I have I am a great nine grandson of Chief Matakawanda, who was a shaman and a chief. His father adopted him because he only had daughters, and
Hmm.
he was of higher blood than his father.
Wow.
And so they adopted him, and
Hmm.
it was funny because there was a lot of bad stuff that happened. For example, the Massachusetts governor at the time, 16 something, um, bought land from him, and he was kind of trying to tell them in his language, we don't own land, we don't own the land, but they were
Hmm.
also holding his daughter in Boston.
Oh, wow. Wow. We have
One of
recently
one of
discovered.
his
Oh, go ahead,
one of
sorry.
his one of his 13 daughters.
Oh, we had 13.
Yeah,
Wow. Well, that would certainly change somebody's perspective, obviously.
yeah.
See, recently I've discovered a channel on YouTube, and he's a Navajo guardian. And I've watched some of his investigations and what he's filmed and what he's done. And I don't think they're faking what you see. But my whole point of bringing it up is, and why I asked about geographics, for example, um, he was addressing him and his brother going into the Navajo desert, for example. And the people were complaining that the skinwalkers had the energy was disturbed. And instead of going in there like big bad people to get rid of whatever was in there, they went in to offer their assistance and to help calm the energy. And they said, we have no right to remove anything from our lands. Speaking of First Nation people, I love the belief systems because, they went in there to help, but not
Yeah,
to remove or harm. Hmm.
right, right.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
it's amazing how helpful Native American people are. I used to go to Sweats in Porterville, California for a while, and the chief there invited me and told me I could come on my own because I had been allowed to come through a friend, and he said
Mhm.
I could come whenever I wanted on my own, and he blessed me, and they were I remember sitting in the TP one time when they were doing the rounds, and I remember he would tell people to pray in their own way. They wouldn't even like force people to do what they did. They were just so decent to everybody. Leadership, the
Mhm.
leaders,
And
incredible.
mentoring the young, and then you know such a respect for the land, nature, animals. And I think the world would be a different place if we certainly, you
Well,
know,
all my relatives includes creatures of all levels, down to the little insects
I
that
love
are
that.
necessary for life.
Hmm. I,
Everything's
lo-
ne- needed.
I agree with you 100%. Mind you, I did find myself asking last summer when we had a yellow jack invasion of our soffit and fast. I kept saying, I know why they're here, but really? I know they serve a
Yeah, yeah.
purpose.
Sometimes you can't. You got to take care of things.
Exactly. Now, I was looking at this. It says statistics have shown that more and more people believe in the afterlife, as ever emerging evidence and information has proven that the body dies, but the spirit lives on. Also, as we discover and uncover more about the universe, do you think we are moving into a new era of acceptance along with less fear in these subjects?
In some cases, yes.
Hmm.
In some areas, yes.
Now, do you think, just from your experiences, do you feel that we're sort of heading more towards more people believing it? We're sort of at a standstill 50-50, or just in your own experience?
I think more people are believing it, but I also think that there's some people that are resisting it.
Well, fear is a funny thing though, isn't it, right? And
Yes.
when we're in a state of fear, right, it's basically it's a survival mode that we have, and it doesn't allow for much else. And the fear of the unknown, and depending on religious dogma, depending on how you've been raised and what you've been taught, in the way of beliefs, that also makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it
Mm-hmm.
does. And it's basically the individual, because there's people from all walks of life that are incredibly gifted, and there's
Mm-hmm.
people from all walks of life that are really close-minded.
That is absolutely true. And that was one of the reasons why I still remember the day I looked was 17 heading into university to get my degree in nursing. And one of the nursing journals I'd ordered had come through, and it was on the cover, and it was nurses talking about their near death experiences. And I was hooked ever since. Ever since. I'm actually writing 3 books, but one of them, and I'm collecting stories right now, and what it is as nurses and being at the bedside, including first responders. And I hadn't thought of it. Another guest had suggested it's a terrible name, but death doulas, too. We witness the most incredible, miraculous, unexplainable things that happen. As I say, a person transitions from here back home. Now, did you hear about any of those stories from anybody at all? It sounds like a few people shared
Yes,
who was going. Hmm.
yes, a couple of people had gone to those levels. There's a lot
Hmm.
of people that had experiences where they reached out to the person too. There was a young woman that she would talk about how sometimes she could enter a person's house and be able to tell them about it later, but the real issue was that she had a friend and she went to sleep, and before you know it, she's walking into his house in her sleep. And
Hmm.
and as she goes around the corner, he has a gun. He's going to shoot
Oh.
himself. And she screams his name and he pulls it away, and it just grazes him. And he didn't do it because of her.
You know what? You just about almost brought me to tears, and I don't cry very easily. Like, how incredible is that?
Yes, yes, it is.
Wow.
It's awesome. That's an awesome story. And, he showed her where the mark was and everything later, because when she had the dream, she woke up and she didn't know if it was real or not. She thought it was real, like she'd lived it, but she wasn't sure. And then she told him, and he showed her, look, this is where it grazed me.
See, now that's the thing, like the dream I shared with you, or what this woman has shared. And I think as human beings, even though we may not believe it, but we know when we've had a dream and we know when it seems so real that
When
we're there.
somebody shows you a scar, you can't deny that, and you
Mhm.
can't deny what took place. But that doesn't mean anyone else. It's not there for anyone else. It's there for you. It's there for
Mhm.
her. That's why it's there. It's not there to help other people. It's there to help you and
Mhm.
allow you to help other people in other ways. But the point is that those situations, I think, are very individual,
Well,
very
I would
for the person at that
I
moment.
I think they are
Like
unique.
I like they had I had an experience where with one woman who she was in her father's house. He had died, and she and her sister had tried everything to find an insurance document they couldn't find, and they finally gave up. They didn't know
Mhm.
what they were going to do, and she's laying down to go to sleep, and she thinks somebody's in her room because she's got her eyes closed, but she's not sleeping, and she's not sure, but she doesn't know if she should make believe she's sleeping or she should startle and wake up, or she knows it's not her sons because they would have they would have been more cautious. And so what happens is she smells her father's cigar smoke that isn't sold anymore, and then she opens her eyes and there he is, and he tells her, it's in the coin saver. The insurance documents in the coin saver. And they go over there a couple days later, and where is it? In the coin saver.
Mhm. I believe you. I've heard many stories like that. I've had experiences myself crazy like this. And the thing is, I agree with you that they are meant individually for the person experiencing it. But with your book and you sharing these stories, it gives
It's
people
to
a lot
help people. It's to
of.
help people open up, and I think that, to either open up or to realize there's other people like them. You know,
Yes, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
but
So
I
in a way
also
oh, go ahead.
protected all my clients by research participants by changing their names.
I was gonna ask you that, but I know from just speaking to you now that I can see you're very a consummate professional. So I figured you probably would have changed their names, or maybe they had. I was eventually might have asked that. I was going to say, or did they agree to have their names put out there?
No, I
So
just put different names down.
that's, you know what, but there's still something to be learned from the stories about that, right? Like
Right,
you said.
right, right. Right,
Mhm.
exactly. And that's at the end of each chapter. In the chapters 2 through 9, there's exercises to help people try to do those things that were key in those stories in the each chapter.
Would you
Like
feel
for
comfortable
example,
sharing? Yeah, would you
for
feel
for
comfortable?
example, one chapter was about how I had one person tell me that she used to have a great aunt and uncle, and when she would see them, she would she would feel them, she would sense them, and she said, like you, I can sense you. I know it's you. I sense you, and she said so when they died and they came to me, I felt them. I didn't see them. I felt them. I thought them. I felt them, but I didn't see them, and And then there was another woman who had things with her mother, and she would always get goosebumps and things like that. And so, at the end of the chapter, I have people try to work on not not thinking, seeing, but feeling through the day. Feel your way through situations. And I actually had another person tell me a story that she was going to a meeting, and she walked into the room and she said, "Oh my God, I was in a great mood and now I'm really angry. What's
Ah,
going on in here?" And they said there was just a huge argument.
I believe that. Absolutely. And people in this field that I think what my belief is that everybody has these abilities, but are you going to be great at everything? No, but does it not mean that you can build on it? Just like some people are natural born mathematicians, athletes, leaders, musicians. Does it mean that you can't learn to do something else? Yes, you may not always be 100% at it, but you can. And the reason why I believe it, again, from looking at near death experiences, looking at past lives, and again, we go back to children, how I mentioned about, a child mentioning a sibling back, I call it home, but not knowing about the miscarriage and being able to say it. There's so out of the mouth of little innocent children, you hear them talk about past lives. They'll talk about all kinds of things like this. So
Right. There
I
was
don't know.
there was a story. And I think it was one of Ian Stevenson's stories, but it was played out in a movie. And the little boy was so young he couldn't have possibly read or understood what he was talking about. And he said, "I was so and so. I died here. My
Mhm.
parents are still alive. They're in their 80s. And I
Yeah.
want to visit them. I want to see them. I want to go see them." And they brought him over to see his parents. And when his parents were there, his uncle walked into the room and he said, "That's my uncle."
Hmm. Hmm. There's a famous story over in India of a little one like that, a little boy, and he was born with a birthmark. Very strange birthmark. I believe it was on the back of the crown of his neck, right up to where the skull meets. And from the time he could speak, he kept saying, I was killed. I was killed. They never found my murderer, and I want to go back to see my wife and my children. And this kid had no idea where the city was he was talking about, and he was so insistent. So as the story goes, the parents finally relented. This kid told them where to go, how to get to the house, the whole thing. They opened the door, told them who this was, that was, but he solved his murder. apparently the person that had taken his life, indeed, I think it was with a machete. His wound that he had died from was where the birthmark was, and he showed them where the murder weapon was. And that's a documented case. Crazy, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
But it's
Mhm.
but it's real.
Mhm. It is, absolutely. So, can you expand a little bit on the 12 key findings that are the common thread in the supernatural experience? The
Well,
individuals are reporting?
the 12 key findings, some of them include the fact that it can happen anywhere. It's not tied into a location. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, and anyone of any age, of any background, can have an experience. Um, People are afraid that they're going to be labeled as crazy.
Mhm, mhm,
Unfortunately, that comes up a lot. That people fear they're going to be labeled crazy, or that that it wasn't real, that people aren't going to believe them.
mhm. I agree with you. And again, working with so many different people, obviously not doing the work that you're doing, but on a different level. And I'll get people that'll contact me and say, I'm wondering if you might have an idea about what this is. And I usually say, well, I don't know everything. This is just my perception. Take what resonates, leave the rest. And they always preface it after that, or right after they'll say, you're gonna think I'm crazy. And very kindly, I always say, try me. I haven't been surprised yet because I always say the more you open this door, what we as human beings believe is everyday regular life, it's like this little miniature dot compared to I'm getting goosebumps as I'm telling you, the whole compared when you open Pandora's box, if you will, the doors to the paranormal. Have you found that yourself too?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I should have
And
told
and
you this.
you
Oh, so I
and you
just go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I
Finish.
was gonna say, I was trying to apologize. I didn't say this to you before we started. I have a bit of a delay, so I don't mean to start as you're about to speak. That my audience knows that, but I forgot to tell you and I wanted to apologize. So go ahead.
Oh, no problem. No, I was just saying that it's interesting because everything is so different, and every experience is unique to that person. So it could be something you can't even imagine. And I made it in my book, I said something about either red birds, or like if you never saw a red bird, it doesn't mean they don't exist.
I've said that many times. Mhm. I always say just because I haven't experienced it or heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
I
The other side of the coin is there are people that have experiences that aren't real, but that's a different story. That's totally different. And those are usually people that are not okay.
I agree, but speaking on that, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But being a nurse, having also worked in mental health and people in a severe mental health crisis, especially when it comes to things like schizophrenia, for example, or something that will induce what would medically be called a hallucination. I have to tell you, no, don't get me wrong. Some people, yes, it's very obvious they're very ill and they need help. But then there's been other people that I have often thought about throughout my career after the fact, now that I'm in this world, thinking, what if they really were seeing what they thought they were seeing? Have you run
Well,
into that?
they might be, but that's not the point I was trying to make. Was that
Mhm.
some
I'm
people?
just asking you out of interest sake. That's all. I know you weren't trying to make
No,
that point. It just popped in my head. Mhm.
but it's the idea that some people don't have real experiences.
I
They're
agree.
not real. And then
Mhm.
there's the people that do, and then there's the people that you wonder about. Because I remember when I managed a group home when I was in college and undergrad, um, and there was a guy, he was schizophrenic, and he actually came up to me one day and he said, Fred, a man sitting in your chair with a hood on, sitting in your chair with a hood on. Well, I saw that when I was a little kid and I had forgotten about it
Wow.
in my mind. And it wasn't a bad hood. It was a tipped hood that was like pointed. And so I was like, what? Oh my God, I can't believe
That's what I was asking you about. That's what I'm asking you about. I
so
forgot to tell you. I
there
just
is
asked what
those
comes to mind. Go ahead, sorry.
there is those type of
Mm,
experiences, but you can't prove those things, that's
mm.
the other thing.
I agree with you. That I should have told you this too before. We were worried about your camera. Yeah, I'll just ask you questions if they come to mind. I'm not trying to deviate from the
No,
book
that's
or
fine.
anything
That's fine.
because I'm so
That's fine.
interested in what you've written about because I think it's such a unique book. Because not just
Right.
sharing people's stories, but also giving them exercises to be able to start having or working on being able to experience it for themselves. I love it.
Right. Yes, and I think that's important. It's like the chapters 2 through 9, the themes are out of the blue, the first thought that comes to your mind, altering time and space, perceiving through feelings and thoughts, interaction with external influences, creatures, perceiving unexpected beings and objects, communicating after death, and ethical supernatural awareness, using your gifts responsibly. I had a guy come in and told me that he took energy from people because
Oh
they
yeah.
didn't protect themselves,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
he could do that. He had a
Yeah.
right to do that. And I said, well, and he said, you're going to tell me that I shouldn't do that. I said, that's right, I'm going to tell you shouldn't do that. But he in other ways he was more honorable, but in that particular issue he wasn't. But he would go to people. He would astral project to people's places, and he would do this. He was married, but he would do this with women, kind of, and not in a bad way. He didn't like do anything inappropriate, but he would show up, and one person had a dog that didn't like him, and so he stopped going there. But he didn't take it the wrong way. He just decided it wasn't a good thing. So he was
Hmm.
being honorable in other ways,
Hmm.
where but there are so many things, there's so many things involved in this. It could go on forever and ever.
I'm just thinking of so many things. Okay, so this is one individual that you were able to interview, but imagine, because I do believe that people are capable of doing this. There are people that are capable of doing it, you know, unconsciously. And then there are people like this individual you've shared that are able to do that.
Yeah,
And other people don't have a clue about this, that somebody can zap your energy if they want, and they can. What a
yeah,
fascinating story.
yeah, yeah. And it points out how it's important to protect yourself and put a light around yourself and things like that, which I have told people. I have an exercise in my other book, Perceptual Hypnosis. It's a protection exercise. It's part of my exercise at the end of the chat of the book. There's a DVD which it's a 50-minute exercise. There's a few little exercises with it. And
Mhm.
so it's one of those things that you know there was a guy that told me a story. He uh he met these people, and they were selling knowledge about witchcraft and stuff, and they would teach people that stuff. And he actually had a moment where he was sleeping in his bed and he saw this guy coming to his house,
Mhm.
astrally,
Mhm.
and he stopped him. He took a cross and he stopped him.
Mhm. And so for to hear something like that, because that is a strange thing to hear, and I know you were open to it. And obviously, there probably was more to the story.
Yes,
But how
it's
were
not
you
the whole
able to
story.
tell the how were you able to tell the difference between somebody that was actually having a real experience versus
The idea of the two things that I was talking about, one is that people have internal experiences and then an external experience, and two, that it transforms them. It really
okay,
transforms them. It
okay,
transforms them. It's not just nothing happens. They're transformed by the experience, or they
gotcha.
or it's had a big impact on them.
I love that. Now, somebody's shared in the audience, R. Sorry, guys, I'm so in depth into this conversation. Usually we pull everybody in more. He says, my daughter-in-law sucks energy from people without knowing it. Have you run into people like that as well, too, Dr. Fred?
That can happen. That can happen in everyday life.
Absolutely. I don't have a big YouTube channel, but two of the videos I share the most. One is how to do grounding and gritting, and I walk people through a meditation in it to create a space of their choosing that they can build upon and create and connect with the other side. But also, the other one I have is how to create a love shield, because I believe that in the way of protection, because I believe that love is one of our most powerful emotions. And to build from that, it involves light as well. But I'm so glad to hear that that's in your books as well, that you've, with the extra, you said 55 minute DV
Well,
is.
a funny thing is, I read a book by a priest who was influential with Franz Mesmer, who was the father of hypnosis,
Mhm.
and he was around in the 1500s, and one of his exercises, I read it and I said, "Oh my God, this is a cognitive behavioral therapy exercise."
Mhm.
But this was written before that,
I think
and
that's pretty cool.
yeah, and it was like, wow, the guy wrote that exercise way before there was any knowledge of that stuff.
So how do you think he came up with it? Just in an opinion, sharing
The
that
spirit, the spiritual aspects, the spiritual.
absolutely. I agree 100%. So, what positive experiences or aspects do you think for yourself that you've gained from writing this book?
Well, it's just the insight that I gained through writing it, like the connections I was able to make, put together through writing it. I didn't realize when I was putting it together that I was able to tie in all those connections, like the things I just said to you. The feelings, the perceiving through feelings and thoughts, interacting with external influences, perceiving unexpected beings and objects, those things. You don't realize each story until you start to put them together.
Yeah, and you see it all in one place. I agree with you. Now
And
you
it,
had
it
mentioned
helps put some kind of connections to some of the stuff, but it's bigger than that, and it always will be. So I think it's like, everybody has something to offer, and it's just being able to do that.
I agree 100%. Now I think I heard you mention with the chapters you were mentioning monsters. Did people come through with stories about that at all as well that you might feel
A
comfortable
little
sharing?
bit, a little bit. I had one guy that told a story that he felt like something dropped, and it was dropping when he was aware, and then he told it to stop or leave, and it did. It did, but there was a couple of demonic experiences too, which were not big ones. They were the people managed them
Mhm.
in the end. they ended up managing them and controlling them, and that's the good side.
You're absolutely right, because it teaches you so much as a human being too, right? To be
Right.
able to tell something to leave and stand in your power, and be able to stop and have some control over the situation.
Yes.
Hmm. Any UFO or
There was a
ET?
couple of UFO experiences, and one of them was a little girl that was going to sit out in her lawn chair, and then she looked up and saw this big, huge ship, and she went to get her daddy, who was working on a car in the garage, and he by the time he got out there, there was nothing there. She said, "But it was
Mhm.
really here." Yeah, sure.
Aw, poor
And
kid.
and and I had another experience where this woman was at a school. She was a teacher, and they were out in the playground, and she got abducted while they were out in the playground.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
so, but I don't know if her body was still where it was,
Hmm.
but she was then brought back, and that was quite a story. That was quite an interesting story. I had that in detail in in my journal article.
Yeah, that's I've been, like I said, I had a strange weekend and I ended up talking to two different people. One I'm going to be on their podcast and one's a future guest. And they got really, one of them really got into talking to me after I'd watched a couple documentaries on the subject, um, about time travel and bending time, and even the actor Terrence Howard. He was just on Joe Rogan recently. I don't know if you saw that interview or not, but him explaining what time is and energy and stuff, because we've never been taught to look at all that stuff. So
Yeah,
I
time is not relevant in certain ways. It's relevant only because we make it relevant.
do you think we have it though too as human beings because it helps us make sense of our world?
Oh yes, but does it? But does it? Does it really do that, or does it
I,
like do something else to us?
I think it makes us a slave to time, right? You know what
Could
time you
be.
go to work. Hmm.
Yeah, you got to go to sleep. You got to get up. You got to do
Hmm.
this. You got to do that. You
Hmm.
know, all that stuff. And is that all relevant? Is it all necessary?
You start getting into the big existential questions once you start opening your mind up to all
Well,
these.
and then even in the Bible, I remember reading that, you know, some of those guys lived to be 900 years old.
Mhm.
There was ages that, and although some of the modern people say that that was like a 4 month year, no, that's not true. But the idea was maybe they had a little less damage from time.
I agree, and I believe exactly what you're saying. I believe that as well, that way back thousands of years ago, people lived much longer lives than we did. Much, much longer lives.
Yeah.
So and the same thing I've always wondered too, and I've heard many different possibilities. And the reason why I asked you about the monster thing, just in your research and some of the stories people have shared with you with this book, where do you think, just personally, where do you think more negative things come from that are in our reality or people experience in the supernatural?
Well, the funny thing is, I remember a scene in a movie, and I don't remember the name of the movie, but it was a awful looking woman, god awful looking, who
Hmm.
was protecting them, who was helping them.
Hmm.
So we put labels on stuff in
Absolutely.
many ways that shouldn't be there.
Hmm.
That we label things in ways we should go more with each experience in the moment. Um, but there was I did have a person tell me about a blob, and the blob was at work, where she worked, and she was a cleaner in a hospital, and the blob followed her to her boyfriend's house, and also to a place where they went investigating,
Hmm.
and then left her alone after that.
Interesting. So when you hear people talk about ghosts, not relatives that are helping them or anything, what's your thoughts on that too? Like, where do you, like, they say they're earthbound, for example. I've heard that theory. It's an earthbound human being that's passed but has chosen not to cross into the light. Did you run into any of that in your research at all?
I ran into that actually doing an investigation myself with a couple people, and
Hmm.
one of the things that I thought was funny was this guy was really negative. He gave his name. I can't remember what his name was, but then I said, "So how can we help you?" And he said, "Impossible." And I just chuckled to myself. I said, "Oh, so you think it's impossible? So of course it is."
That is so true, right? Wasn't it Henry Ford that said, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you shall be successful?
Yes, that's true. And but it was funny because he was saying, "No, you can't help me.
Mhm,
Impossible. Impossible," was his answer.
mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, okay. So no, I can't help you."
In my experience with situations like that, though, there's various reasons, why people or souls, whatever ghosts, whatever people want to call it, choose to still remain on this earthly plane.
Oh, I'm
So,
sure there's reasons. I'm sure some of the reasons are good, some might not be, but I'm sure there's always a reason for whatever takes place. It's the way humans are too. It's
mhm.
like things don't always make sense to another person, but they do to that person.
Well, I agree too. And then even when something happens, right? And some really incredible things, say, for example, in life have happened because of something terrible somebody has experienced, but they choose to take that experience and transform themselves and do something incredible for humanity. So I love what you had said about your book by the measurement that you, not measurement is probably the wrong word, but I love that you looked at, did this experience they've shared transform them? So were people able to share some of their transformations or how it had changed their lives in the book?
Yes, yes, they did. Yes.
Beautiful. And I just think it's so important. Like I said, I don't think I've ever come across a book like yours before, because I think because of what we're seeing on TV, and you see it worldwide, it's really grown, I think, an interest in the paranormal than, say, what it was 20 years ago. And people want to know more about it, or how can I, or am I even able to tap into some of these abilities that I see other people, or the stories or experiences they share. And it kind of sounds like your book is opening that doorway for them. Would I be right in saying that?
Yes.
Or
Yes, it
mhm,
is. Yes.
mhm.
Yes, you would be.
So I love that you said that, like, one of the exercises was people, feeling their way through the day. Can you share maybe one or two different exercises that you don't have to go into like, we want people to buy the book, and I think they should buy the book, because I think this is really going to give them a lot of great exercises they probably never seen before or even thought to try. But is there a couple of other things that people might be able to learn from the
Um,
exercises?
Trying to think. I don't remember everything I wrote down in
I
detail.
understand. I
So
understand, I
it's
understand.
the ethical supernatural awareness part was important too, because it was like, to practice being safe and not doing any harm to anyone else when you're doing that. There was a woman that gave me a story that was actually gifted to a degree, and she went to a house with a friend of hers. It was uh, where they would exposed the ghosts that were there and let the people see them. And she got involved with the ghosts and sent them, helped them out of the place, so there wasn't any ghosts there after that. And and she had an interesting story, but she was doing the right thing. She was trying to do the right thing. And her friend was like, "Why couldn't you have waited until we were done? I wanted to understand. I wanted to experience that."
Mhm. I have met people that are mediums and have been kicked off of paranormal teams when all they wanted to do is go in and help, and then had the rest of people or places that run these places notoriously haunted to go, people pay to go there, and it's like, don't you dare help anybody here, because then we won't have any more ghosts. This is really what I've heard people be told. So I could understand, right? Like, what's the right thing to do? And
It
not
depends
even
on
at
what the experience, what you're trying to experience. She was at a different level than the other people there. The other people just wanted to experience it. She wanted to fix it.
right, or at least offer her help, right? And
Right.
she was able to help. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because that definitely is a place where I think we could do some building on ethics when it comes to the paranormal. Even when, and a lot of people watch TV
Well,
and
the thing that scares me about the paranormal is the first step is to prove that something exists. The next
Mhm.
step is to capture it or prevent it from going wherever you want it to with the threat of harm.
I hope I hear what you're saying, because we've seen this with, depending on what some people call it, Sabe, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and that's the big thing. Let's go out and hunt it and kill it, and or capture it and keep it on parade for everybody to poke and prod and test and what, right? That's a very good point you just brought up.
Yeah. I worry about that because I don't think that's what it's all about. I think it's about each person just having their experience
I
that
agree.
helps them and then moving forward themselves, not each person being connected to a system that controls it all.
That's why I think when I brought up earlier about these Navajo guardians and the way that they handled the situation, and I had so much respect for them, instead of maybe somebody else going in there and saying, you're banished from these lands, doing whatever they could do, because people have different abilities, but going in to offer assistance if needed, trying to calm down the energy, and then teaching the audience that this is not our right to go in here and remove anything. This is where they live. And the energy was stirred up for whatever reason. These were their words. And they were going in just to assist. And if we could just see that as human beings, right? That it's not
Right.
our right. I hear what you're saying. I hadn't even considered that till you brought that up. You've really given me some food for thought, because yeah, what if something was developed to keep something captive?
Right. And you don't want that. You want
Mhm.
to take care of you and keep yourself protected
Mhm.
so you're not harmed by anything, but you don't want to do the opposite of that.
Yeah, cause harm. It actually made me just think of, what, sharks, for example, right? They have a right to be. We're swimming in their habitat, and yet what's happened, right? We, as the human race, we've done a lot of things
Well,
with physical.
the funny thing is about sharks that I learned was they don't really like human beings, so they'll take a big bite out of you,
Exactly.
and that could kill you. It could hurt you or
Mhm,
kill you, but they're not coming back for a second bite.
mhm, mhm. But that's what it made me think, because that's historically what the human race has done with something they're afraid of, or, first thing is, let's eradicate it, or try and go up, Australia with the cane toads, thinking they're going to fix one problem, and
Well,
every
like
time
if they could prove that people leave their bodies and move around, then they might say, okay, that's fine, but you can't come to the White House. And if you come to the White House, this is what we're going to do.
The reason why I've given this some thought that you've said this is when you start looking into remote viewing and mind things like that, right? I don't know, could they do it? Could they do it or on the way to developing it? So I think it's a really important conversation to have about ethics when we're talking about these experiences. And I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah, to do no harm, to do no harm.
I agree. We are almost out of time. This went by so quickly,
Oh,
and
it
I'm
did.
so grateful. I'm so
Well, we
grateful, and I apologize. I should have told you ahead of time because everybody in my audience knows because this happens with David on Thursdays, and it'll seem like
well,
there's a pause. So I'm sorry.
no, that's fine. You know what? You know what? We could maybe do another one down the road.
I would love to. I'd love to have you back.
All right, that sounds good. So down the
Mhm.
road.
People are putting in the comments. Sorry, guys. Usually I pull you in more often, but I have so many questions, and I didn't get a chance to tell you. Usually tell my guests too. It's just a conversation. So I'm really curious about people. I'm not nosy, but I think everybody has a story to tell. So I would just ask you questions that come to mind, and people are going, "What a great show! They really enjoyed it." So I would love to have you back on, Dr. Fred.
Thank you. So we'll do that sometime.
Well, tell people where can they get a hold of you? Where can they buy your
Um,
books? What have you got coming
my
up? If
my
anything?
books can be bought at Amazon or any books shop that you want to buy it. In my book, Developing Your Supernatural Awareness, Connecting to an Interactive Universe, is written was written by Sixth Books, so they're
Okay.
out of the UK, and that's a good place. And my you can contact me at drfwoodard at hushmail.com, the email address, or my office phone is 603-673-25882.
Well, I really appreciate having you on here. Like I say, people are putting in great watch, and there's going to be people seeing on watching it on the replay. So I'm so glad you came on. I want to thank
Thank you.
everybody in the comments. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I said that. Thank you.
I can't wait to have you back on. I'm very passionate about this world, and every day I learn something new about it or talking to different people. And like I say, I'm very excited about your book. I will be recommending it to a lot of people because I can't think of another book. And I've been doing this a long time, podcasting, that is like yours. So I'm super excited to tell people about it.
Good. Thank you.
And I want to tell all of you, thank you for tuning in live. If you ever want to get a hold of me, I do energy healing, teaching, mentoring. I also do readings. And all kinds of things like that. You can get a hold of me on facebook.com/Angel Rock. Believe it or not, folks, I do have a website I never give out because the name is long, and I am revamping it. We're going to go to a domain name. So I'll let you know when that's up and running. Also, I've got 2 groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for all things paranormal, the Angel Rocker Tribe for more of the spiritual type questions and things that we do. Also, please tune in Thursday night. David and I will be back 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget to join our group for the show that we started probably almost 2 months ago. It's The Thing at the Foot of the Bed with Lorilei, Potvin, and David Hansel. When we get to 200 people, we've been promising you, and we will do it. David and I will start going live in the group, whether it's answering questions, doing some quick 1-question readings or what. So make sure to tell all your friends and family about it. Easiest and fastest way to get a hold of me is Facebook Messenger. My profile is public, so anybody can get a hold of me. And I am on every single social media platform you can think of, either under the Angel Rock or Lorilei Potvin. Next week, I think actually I'm going to warn you guys. I just thought about it. It's June the 3rd, I think. And I have a guest that is over from the UK, and it's late over there. So we're going to pre-record the show. So you won't have seen the show. I'm just going to pre-record it on the Monday next week. So it'll be better for their time schedule. So it will be a new show, but just so you know. Okay, everybody. I love you all. Have a great week. Stay spooky. We'll see you Thursday and back here on the Angel Rock at the same time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks again, Dr. Fred.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everybody.